Okay, hello YouTube. So we're back. I have completed the right side. I haven't done my fine adjustment on the steam knob yet, but we've come quite a ways. So what I hadn't shown you is how to remove the top, power down the machine, and unplug the cord. But my message would be is if you don't know how to do that, you probably should not be trying to rebuild your steam valves. But let's say you were able to power it down, unplug it from the wall, depressurize the tanks, and things are cooled down. Then what I'm going to show you is how nicely these steam valves come off on these newer Lineas. Pleasantly surprised. This is the first time I've rebuilt them myself, and so I had to work my way through a few things. So first thing I'm going to do, of course, there's no pressure in the system. We're going to take this little cap off the steam knob. They're usually only hand tight, that's all they really should be. But you go ahead and screw this off. What you're going to see is the adjustment knob on the valve stem, so bear with me. We're also going to undo this zip tie that's on the pressure relief valve. And you want to break this tubing loose, rotate it a little bit, and if it doesn't come off easily, I wouldn't keep pulling on it. What I would do is grab a screwdriver and give it just a little pry to get it unsealed a little bit. And I'm working one-handed, which, believe me, is not easy holding a camera and doing this. But usually once you get it started, it's kind of like a set of Chinese handcuffs. If you pull too tight, it's actually squeezing tighter on the little valve stem here. So just work it, and there we go. It just slid right off. So it's a little tough at first, but then it usually gives way. Now the other thing we're going to do, and I'm going to put the camera down for this, I'm going to do a couple things. I am going to undo this adjustment nut. You basically hold the nut in place, and while holding the nut, you turn the stem, and it will break loose of that nut. So we keep going until the nut comes free. Now if you have a deep socket, I believe it's a 9 or a 10 millimeter, you can screw right through the socket, or basically do what I'm doing, which is remove the nut like that. And there is a washer in here, copper washer, you're going to have to get out. You could slide the whole knob off at this point, but I did want you to be aware there is a washer in here. You are going to replace this as part of the service. I just like to hang on to things and not let stuff fall all over the place. It's giving me a little trouble. There we go. So here's that washer. And now take an Allen wrench and take the stop bolt, which prevents the steam knob from rotating all the way around. And by the way, when you go to take this out, there is a washer underneath. So if you kind of put your finger back there, you'll pull up the washer with the stop nut. And then you are able to continuously turn the steam knob until it comes off the steam valve completely. And there is a washer in the back of this knob that's going to be replaced. We're going to set that off to the side. So the beauty of this at this point, you can actually, without having to remove this lock nut and adjustment piece, extension piece, the nice thing about this particular machine is you can literally take the whole valve stem out at this point. And that makes the body of the valve shorter, so when we're going to get it out of the base or the frame of the machine, you can actually take it out. If this stem were left in, you have an interference and you're not able to get the body of the valve out. So I'm going to pull this off and put this off to the side on our workspace in a second. And so what we have left at this point is the lock nut that's holding the steam valve body in, and the steam tube that goes back to the steam tank. So we're going to undo this nut here, and the nut that's retaining the body of the valve. But in order to do that, again, we may have to loosen this nut on the back so that this whole steam tube is free to move laterally. Because I found on the other side that when I went to take this nut off, I couldn't unthread it all the way and I wasn't able to bend this tube. It's pretty stiff. And I think rather than damaging the tube, it's better to loosen up both nuts and allow it to slide back on its own. Okay, so we're going to take our adjustable wrench. We're going to hold the valve body here. I'm going to work on this nut that's on the back. Be careful when you break free with these nuts that you don't, yank on a wire and pull it or damage a solenoid or something that's in the neighborhood. So get a good firm grip on the valve body and try to hold that steady. And I'm noticing already that I'm getting some turning here on this assembly in the back. So now what I'm going to end up doing to prevent that from turning, I don't have very many open-ended box wrenches, so I'm going to come in here with my channel locks and hold this and try and break this nut free. And there it is. So that worked just fine. I will attempt to get it off, and already I'm running into some resistance. So what I'm going to end up doing is exactly what I did before. I'm going to move to the valve on the steam tank. I'm going to close it. I've already depressurized the tank, by the way. And these are not the right size for this, so I am going to take my larger wrench. Be careful of nearby components. You don't want to be bumping into anything. So I'm going to take my larger wrench, come in on a slight angle so I don't bump up against any other sensitive components. Come in with my second wrench and break that free. There we go. Sorry, I can't give you a close-up. I've got my hands free while I'm working. So I'm going to loosen this one up on this end. Now you see the whole tube is free and I can switch back to the front. And by creating some space in the back, I can undo the rest of the tube. Now I'm going to, just as a matter of practice, I'm going to rethread this just a tiny bit in the back to keep that tube from falling out of place, or if there's any kind of seal or anything, I don't want it to slip out of there. So now what I have is just the valve body remaining. So now I will take my, this is really kind of a standard deep socket for dealing with valves and retention nuts that I happen to have in my kit. I think I mentioned that before. And I'm going to take the nut that's holding this valve body onto the frame of the machine, and I'm going to break it loose. There we go. And I'm going to just use my fingers to finish unthreading this. And we are just about free here. There's the nut, and there is a right side and a wrong side. The face that goes to the frame of the machine has a very skinny rail. There's a wide surface and a skinny. The skinny goes to the machine. And what happens is if you take the valve stem underneath and just turn it towards the back, what you'll be able to do is back this valve body up, tilt it up a little bit, and voila. We're free of the machine and we can go to work at the bench. Start on the steam wand assembly. Let's clear the space a little bit. That's pretty tight, guys. Wow. That took quite a bit of effort, actually, so important to have these things sealed up very tight. So we'll go ahead, continue undoing this steam wand nut. We got a couple things we're going to take apart here. There's a spring inside. I'm going to set that off to the side. As I said earlier, I like to keep my parts collected. We're going to start. We're going to take the steam wand end off. It's going to have to get the sealer redone. I'm going to put this off to the side. Take a little bit of lubricant, not too much, just a tiny bit on the pole here, on the steam wand, just to get this rubber moving off a little bit easier. And there we go. Get this little piece of safety rubber that protects your hands from burning. So now the stem is completely free to be removed, but before we do, there's actually a component on the inside, so we're going to hold this and push it out. There it is. This is part of what will be replaced. You've got a this plastic piece with a O-ring. There's a washer on the end of this, by the way. It might not look like it. It's kind of dirty, but there it is. Copper or brass washer, probably. So I'm going to set these. I like to keep my assembly components together to remember what is what when it goes back together. And so now steam wand is free to come out. And what I was alluding to earlier is there is a O-ring seal in here. We're going to take our angle tool and pull this guy out. Sometimes these can be stuck in there pretty good. Yeah, it's not cooperating. So we are going to work it, loosen it up on the top a little bit, and then give it another go on the inside. And again. This sucker is really stuck in there. This is what the heat over time can do, and as the lubricant starts to disappear, there we go. Here's this guy coming out. This is actually in pretty bad shape. I don't think you can see it on the camera, but it's got quite a bit of wear, which is past due for changing. So that takes care of what's on the inside of this. So basically the steam wand is fully disassembled at this point. There are no more components in here, but this is dirty and we are going to have to clean that out in just a bit. Take off this pressure relief valve. There we go. Now there is a washer on here as well. It's a special kind of washer. It's the type that crushes under load. So we are going to take these two guys. There's really nothing. This is an assembly and it does come apart. And it's got a couple components in it. You can hear they're free to move, but in the steam rebuild kit, you don't have components to replace inside of here. You'd have to order these components separately. So we're going to set this guy off to the side for right now. Now, last but not least, not as hard to come off. Got a Teflon washer on there. Okay, so there's a spring on the inside and Teflon washer on this side. And you want to take care when you're breaking these washers free that the screwdriver doesn't get away from you and stab you. That hurts. Also, you know, just be mindful of the threads because these are brass components. It's a softer metal that can be damaged, scratched, etc. So there we go, finally broke free. just, you know, these surfaces are together so long and under high temperature that a lot of times these components, they pretty much seize up or bond the surface a little bit. So I'll put this guy off to the side. That's pretty much, we're gonna end up cleaning all these components. Spring will keep that together. Now inside is the seat. So we're gonna take this out. And this has one end that the spring sits in. And it's got on the other end, it's got a little rubber seat that you can see has a pretty distinct imprint from the metal valve seat that it presses up against. That's wear. And over time, this is where you're gonna have a problem with a leak. This side is actually in worse shape than the right side, which means it's probably, this left steam wand was probably getting a little more use. So again, we're gonna take our curved awl and we're gonna pop this guy out. Again, it's gonna be stubborn because it's been in there for a while and it's had time to heat up and cool down over and over again and kind of get itself stuck to the side wall of this component. So there we go, it's coming, but you gotta break it loose on all the sides. There we go. That is a replaceable component. And again, we're gonna clean all these up. I'm just gonna move it off to the side. And last but not least, there is a valve seat inside of this thing. And you are going to need an Allen wrench. I don't know all the sizes, but if you have a kit with a bunch of different sizes, you're in good shape. You're gonna slide this in and undo it by hand. You know, these things are tight, but they're not super torqued down. And when you get it out, there we go. And what you see, actually, this was some debris that came out. That's kind of important that we get all this stuff out. This is probably a shaving of the original Teflon washer that's on there. So you can see on the bottom of this valve seat, a little Teflon washer. We're gonna break it free all the way around, and then we're gonna walk it up the threads. And as I said, you could see some small particles like this right here. That stuff's all gotta be removed. You don't want any of that left in the valve where it can interfere with the seat closing properly. And there you have it, that's the complete disassembly. And on the next phase, we're gonna turn around and put it all back together. But before I do, I'm gonna clean everything up. Okay, I just took a quick break, washed the parts, got my cappuccino. Ran my cappuccino on my backup machine, by the way. Okay, let's see what we can do to get this guy back together properly. Get our packet of rebuild kit parts. Always get original parts when you're doing important work like this. You got my Marzocco rebuild kit. You don't want to go with third-party components that aren't going to be manufactured to the proper specifications and so on. So we're going to get these guys off to the side. All right, my washer. All right, so we're going to take our green O-ring. We're going to take some of our 111 compound from DuPont. This is a non-toxic food grade lubricant for silicone O-rings. This does not attack the chemical makeup of the components that are involved, which is absolutely critical when you're doing these kinds of repairs. You don't want something that's going to eat away at the surface of these new O-rings we're putting in and just prematurely cause them to fail on you. So I'm going to use the steam wand actually. A little bit of debris in the top there. I'm just going to use this to push this guy in. You can see it coming through on the other side, by the way. So, got it in place, and I already lubricated it going in, but I'm going to put a lot more on this side of the steam valve. The surface that comes into contact with the O-ring itself. You just can't, I think in many ways you can't put too much of this stuff in. You do want to be careful not to clog up the actual internal ports where the steam is flowing, and you don't want to do that. I want to tuck a little bit more. We'll just kind of put some back on the O-ring in there using the end of the steam on, but I want to put a little bit more on this underside surface. It's really going to be resting on that O-ring. Slide that guy back in. You can really feel that lubricant and work it around, make sure it's distributed nicely. That feels pretty good. Now on the inside, this plastic component, you can see it's got a curved surface. That's the surface that's going to go against the curved side of the steam wand. But first we got to put this O-ring seal on it. Again, you want to lube these O-rings up real nice. It helps preserve them under these high temperatures and allows the components to move freely. You go ahead and put this guy on, and then don't be afraid again to slather some of your food safe lubricant on there. And then on the curved surface, I give it a little bit more. Drop this in, curve to curve. And then we've got a washer that's going to sit on the back of that. Okay. There's a washer there because you're basically coming into contact with a spring, which has got quite a bit of force on it actually. It's kind of a heavy duty spring. I'm going to go ahead and put some lubricant on this spring. If nothing else, helps protect the surface of the metal, but certainly if it comes into contact with anything, provides, again, lubrication, so the two surfaces can slide past each other instead of digging into each other. We got a copper washer that goes on the outside of this. So again, we got the brass washer on the bottom. I'm not going to torque anything up just yet. Make sure I got good lubrication. Bottom. We are now going to take our rubber protector sleeve, slide this guy back on. And there's no real specific order you need to reassemble this in. It's really whatever you're comfortable with. You get this lubricant all over your hands and different components, and pretty soon everything you touch is sliding all over the place. I like to put a tiny bit of Teflon thread sealer tape on the end of this guy. Actually, I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to this stuff, so I'm gonna put a thinner strip so I don't have any hanging out of the side. Don't leave any inside of the passageway. And I like to take these steam tips. I got some of the old tape kind of crud inside. I just want to get that old tape gently out of there. The other thing I like to do, take a fine wire, or maybe you have an appropriate tool, is just make sure your steam passageways are clear. Be careful not to actually use something that opens up these holes bigger. It's just going to make the steam flow through a little more aggressively when you're steaming your milk, and it may not be what you want. If you ever damage one of those, you can buy a replacement. It's not a big deal. I've got some crud on the bottom here. I'm just going to gently take off. There's probably some milk that gets baked on over time. I'm sure that doesn't help the flavor of your steamed milk. So even though we're very diligent in our cleaning of our steam wands every day, you still get some stuff building up that you can't really see. This guy's ready to go back on. And this is, other than not torquing this down yet, this is pretty much assembled, and just how nice it is to feel the wand move so easily now again in this joint. Okay, and then getting over to this side, remember we took the metal valve seat out. So we're gonna have to take the Teflon washer that goes on the bottom. Don't forget that. And I go ahead and put the whole thing on my Allen wrench. Gently slide it in, let gravity kind of take it down, and maybe find that starting thread. Give it a spin until you feel it starts to grab, and then you can kind of give it a tight hand twist, and that should do it. Be careful when you're working with that valve seat not to damage the surface with a sharp object, or even when you're pulling your Allen wrench out, try to come out evenly. Okay, so then we're gonna take this little plunger. We're gonna put in our new rubber seat. Okay. I'm going to add a little lubricant on the surface and sides. Okay. We'll drop this guy in. I'm going to set the spring on the back side of that plunger. And this, now we get our Teflon ring. And line these parts up. You know, one thing I'm going to do before I leave here too quickly, get some lubricant on this spring as well. Again, it's just when metal parts come into contact with other metal parts, it's better to have some lubricant on them so that they go past each other more easily. There's that. We have our little pressure relief valve. This gets a special crush washer. It's kind of rounded, it's got some thickness to it, and it actually smashes into place when it's sealing up. So, and of course, the critical aspect of this is the positioning of this stem when you're done tightening it down. So this goes in the machine like this, and this stem has to be pointing to the back of the valve. So we've got to make that half a turn. Here we go. Just keep an eye on it. Get it lined up and stop. Okay, let's torque the rest of this guy up. Good. Gotta do this one. So I can actually get an open end wrench on this end. Okay, I've tightened this, I've tightened this, I've tightened this and lined it up. So we're good on this for right now. Let's take a look at the valve stem itself. You can see it has 5 O-ring washers on it. So I'm going to take my hook awl and I'm going to grab the first guy and just, you're going to be replacing these, so if they broke, it's not a big deal. Sometimes I like to get a couple of them off safely, just in case one of the new ones ends up damaged. And I like to start with the top one because it rolls over the surfaces of the next in line. I've found a little bit easier. Okay, got all of those off. Surfaces have already been cleaned. All right, so I'm going to take a little lubrication. Put it on the shaft. Take the first one, put a little bit on there as well. Get it into the first position. Take another one. And there we go. So now we're gonna really coat the shaft up. I put a little extra down here because I know some of it's gonna end up sliding up the shaft as we insert this. So at this point, we're in pretty good shape. The only components we have left in our rebuild kit actually have to do with the steam knob and the seating of this stem. So in fact, this Teflon goes behind the steam knob, and this copper one goes on the nut side of the steam knob. And there you have it. We're rebuilt and we're ready to go back together. So I'm basically going to kind of gently take the valve back in. I've got the steam one spun around backwards. It seems to be that's the easiest way to kind of get it back in. Slide the valve back into the face of the frame and let it rest. And we're going to take this steam line we disconnected. If you remember, I had to disconnect it because I couldn't get the tube back far enough to allow this nut to completely release. So again, I'm going to loosen up the nut on the back. And I'm going to keep my finger there because I'm not sure if there's a seal. I'm going to back it off so I can get it onto the end of the valve up here in the front. And I am going to get this nut threaded or started at a minimum. As easy as you might think because of all of the angles the tubing is throwing your alignment off. There we go. Now I got it gently, just finger tight. Then I go back to the back of the tank and hold the valve, lift the valve up front so I can get the thread, the nut in the back threaded just gently. Nothing tight, just, you know, finger tight. That's all we need. So now I've got my threading started on both sides. I'm in the face of the frame of the unit, and I'm going to take the lock nut for the valve body, and I'm going to go ahead. Now remember, you've got a wide surface and you've got a very narrow surface. It's the narrow surface that goes to the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and just get this started and take my deep socket. I'm just finger tight right now. That's all I am. Everything is finger tight. I've got the locking nut for the valve body into the frame. I've got my steam tube thumb tight. There we go. And that all feels pretty good. So the first order I want to go in, I don't want any load on the frame or the valve body when I tighten my steam tube up. I want that to be kind of naturally fall into its natural position. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a little more effort on tightening this. You want to hold that valve body from moving. And the reason you do the finger tightening on these tubes is to get those surfaces, the mating surface of the tube and this valve fitting here on the steam tank, you want those well seated, evenly aligned on both ends. That's going to give you the best seal. So that's the idea behind finger tightening those nuts. And then I'm just going to snug it a little bit and make sure that alignment is where it needs to be. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing in the back. This is really about alignment for me, just to make sure the tube is where it wants to be naturally. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to give this a little more of a torque. Again, holding the valve body so I don't deform the tube, and I get the tightening transferred into the nut I'm trying to tighten. Okay. I'm going to move to the back, which unfortunately is a different size than I have for an open-end wrench. Again, I'm going to hold this valve body. I'm going to be careful of the componentry. There's some, looks like a thermistor or some kind of temperature sensor right behind here. I don't want to come near that thing and damage it, because you put so much force into these wrenches, you'd be bumping into that plastic component and not even realize it. So I'm going to hold the valve at the base from turning, and I'm going to torque that tube back on, and that takes me to the front of the machine, where I'm going to hold the valve body again. And there you have it. It's all good to go. We do have our relief valve tubing. We're going to slide back in while we're here. Remember, we're going to have to put zip ties on these because we cut off the original ones. So we're going to have to re-zip tie this on both sides. And then that brings us to our valve stem, which, remember, I put quite a bit of lubricant on the end of this thing. So we are now able to slide this back in. And you can feel it's a little tighter because these O-rings now are brand new. A little bit of a tighter fit. You can feel you reach the end there where we have that spring plunger on the back end of the valve. Then I'm going to wipe off some of the excess lubricant that's hanging out the end of the steam knob here. And instead, I'm going to add some to the threads on the front of the machine. So we're going to take this video off, come around, and see we're going to take some of this lubrication and get it in the threads here. Make sure that steam knob has nice smooth action and no heavy friction with respect to the surface of those threads. And as I said, we put the tube back on. We're going to have to zip tie it. We've torqued down the nut in the back for the steam tube. We've torqued the nut in the back here. So all of this is pretty tight. We can now put our Teflon or nylon washer, I'm not sure what this is, onto the shaft here. Remember, we didn't have to take this lock nut off, so I think we're in good shape in terms of its relative position. When we engage the steam valve, we are now able to take the knob, and these are reverse threaded, so I'm turning to the left and it's screwing on. I think you can see that. I'm going to run it all the way to the bottom, and then I'm going to, you can actually see, if you look carefully, you can see the stop edge, which is right here. That's what's going to hit that bolt head and stop. So if I back this thing up, if I'm all the way down, you realize that if I put the screw in now, it would hit that stop too soon. I've only gone half a turn. So I'm going to get past the stop once. There, now I'm wide open. And I'm going to go ahead and take my stop bolt. It's got some washers on there. We'll set it back in. Make sure we're clear down there, that that little stop edge is not in your way, because you don't want to torque down on top of that thing. And then we're just going to snug it back up. I'm not torquing it down yet. Just wanted to show you that this allows the valve to go full. But if I had this seated all the way and put this stop bolt in, I would only get about a half a turn. So I know that I've got to be a little bit past that to get the full opening of the steam valve. Now we're in the closed position. I didn't put the copper washer, retention washer, and nut on the handle yet, but I am going to do that. And again, I hold this nut with my needle nose pliers here, and then I turn the center of the shaft with a regular screwdriver to get this to thread on. If we need to do any adjustments on this, we could, but I don't anticipate any issues because we never had to take the extension shaft off, so the adjustment from the factory should still be just fine. Okay, so we're gonna shut it down, button up the top, put the zip ties on, and in reverse order, get the zip ties on, then put the top back on, and get this thing up to temperature. Okay, we're back up to temperature. Things are looking good. I don't have any leaks at any of the joints we worked at. I still have to put my zip ties on, but we got real nice action here. Very smooth and easy movement of the steam wand. One thing I wanted to point out, when I put the nut back on, you really need to, and I took it off on this side again, you really need to lubricate this washer, because this washer is on the face of the valve stem and the steam knob. And if you notice, when we turn this knob, the shaft does not open. It's basically moving the shaft in and out to open the valve. So there is friction between that washer on both sides of this steam knob. You've got a Teflon washer in the back and the copper washer in front. There is friction. So you do want to have this metal washer in the front lubricated. And when you tighten your nut, you want to make sure that it's not so tight that the shaft is turning with the knob. Okay, so those are the last two comments. I'm going to go ahead and button the machine up, and we are done. So from Black Box Gallery, coffee shop and art gallery in Dearborn, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. I hope you enjoyed the video. Now there is one on the internet for those of you who have a Linea too, and good luck.